work on the quality of their language, I think they can make it, they will grow into a even more effective speaker. So somewhere down the line, your challenge is working on the quality of the language. And that way, Junaid, I think you also will be less dependent on the written text. So it is good to have the written text, but if we are too glued to it, then our chances of losing eye contact with the audience is more. So be less glued to the text. Yes, having the text is very important because then we are sure of what we are going to discuss, and we present the ideas in a very crisp and precise manner. So those pluses are there, and it is good that you did that job properly. Just focus on, and language development is a long drawn process. In your case, there is a specific problem of pronunciation also, maybe mother tongue. You belong to which place, Junaid?
Aligarh.
Aligarh. So maybe there was some influence of the local dialect in your language. Present, for example, you said. How do you say present? Just say it again.
Present.
Now you pronounced it correctly. That means you can pronounce it correctly. But sometimes when we present, then there may be some influence of the local dialect. So if you can overcome it, become more conscious of it, you will be uh, you will be correct in terms of your diction and pronunciation.
Okay, sir.
So thank you both of you. Now we'll carry this discussion forward, which we are carrying. So what is actually controlling then? What the act of controlling? We have already discussed various ideas. So it is actually a process through which we ensure that all our activities, match the standards that we have set at the planning stage, isn't it? What do we do in planning? We decide what is to be accomplished, and we decide when it is to be accomplished, and we also decide how it is to be accomplished, isn't it? For example, at what cost the objectives will be achieved. For example, if I say that I want to have 10% share market share for my produce, isn't it? This objective is fine, but at what cost? If our expenditure goes up, then the sales revenue that we are able to earn, there is no point, isn't it? So, in the planning stage, we decide what is to be done, we decide when it is to be done, and we also decide how it is to be done, isn't it? And we have to ensure that, for example, when I teach a course, this is a very unique situation, we are teaching online. So, when I start the course, I set my expectations before the students. I tell them, for example, that okay, we are together for another 45 hours. So in next 45 hours, we shall be spending during this span of 3 months. We will be taking up this course. So I have decided on one of the aspects, the time frame, isn't it? And I also set the expectations. What will you gain out of it? And I tell them that it's an integrative course. And after going through this, you will be able to understand the basic management process. So that's my goal. And I'm concerned, and I'm all the time deciding about how to measure that I'm moving in the right direction. Maybe I decide to hold the written test. Maybe I decide to hold some presentations. Maybe I decide to hold some sessional tests. So all that is the part of how I'm going to measure the performance, isn't it? And when I'm going to measure that performance, isn't it? So these questions we set in the planning stage. Now in the act of controlling, what do? We ensure that these activities are taking place as per the plan. Am I clear on this? So what is then what are the steps in the control process? There are primary 4 steps. One, we set standards of performance, and that links controlling with planning. In fact, planning and controlling are very intricately linked because we set the standards of performance in the planning stage, isn't it? So that is something which is the first step in the process of control. Now what happens next? Again, look at the example which I shared with you. We doing a course together. So we need to ensure we measure the performance, how well you have done. So for example, if we have decided that we will be assessing you on the basis of the presentations that you make, the recap that you make, we will be assessing you on the basis of the project work that you will be doing. Now we have decided to have some written assignment also from you, because sessional test in the regular format may not be possible, isn't it? So we will measure your performance, isn't it? And then what happens next? We compare the performance, whether we are moving in the right direction. So when we compare the performance with the actual performance, what do we get? We get, there are three possibilities. Our performance matches the standards, or there is a negative deviation, or there is a likelihood of a positive deviation also. Then what do we do next? Once we compare and we find that either there is no difference, or there is a positive difference, or there is a negative difference, negative deviation. So in the next step, what do? We decide on the corrective actions that we need to introduce. So it looks very logical, we're starting with setting standards, then measuring, and then comparing, and finally corrective actions. So these are the steps in the control process. Now in the next, I'll be presenting before you this in a systematic manner, and let me see whether I am able to run this slide for you. So I was talking about these steps. Process of control, I told you what it is. And what do we ensure? Are you able to see the slide?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So what do we do in this? We ensure that our activities conform to the planned activities. So actually controlling is a very powerful function, because that decides the effectiveness of primarily planning and all the rest of the things that we have been doing. I told you about the social phenomena. Best control would be one which is self-control. People know themselves what is expected of them, isn't it? So actually it's a good indicator of your leading abilities also. Have you been able to inspire your team? I told you the example of that salesperson to whom the manager said, use your good judgment and there are no rules. So if a salesperson visits a particular area, for example, and he finds that, this kind of accommodation is good enough for me, and I can have a decent living here, I can spend my time nicely over here. So naturally, no manager can make their good judgment on his behalf. He knows what are his needs. He knows the reasonable cost at which he should acquire those facilities. So actually, a manager making that statement that use your good judgment and there are no rules other than this is a very powerful act of leading, isn't it? Then we come to the steps, and I told you about establishing standards of measuring performance and how do we assess. That also is very important. So I told you about methods. For example, I can assess it through your presentations or through project work or through written tests, whatever. So I have to ensure establish the standards, also how I'm going to measure them. Then finally we have to measure the performance. Now again, this also is a very repetitive kind of process. Now how often we should do it? Generally, for example, if I am assessing you, there are two possibilities. We can have the final test. We can have the, in fact, for example, I recall in my student days, the teaching was semester wise, but exam was annual. So as soon as the first term would get over and we would get into the second semester without the examination being held. And then the examination was held after all the courses of first year were taught. Now what was the impact of it? The papers which we had studied recently, we were able to do good in those papers. And the papers that we had studied in the first semester, they used to create huge problem for us, because there was a gap between the performance which has happened and the measurement of that performance. So you have studied a subject 3 months back and now you are being assessed for that. Naturally, such long gaps are not desirable for, monitoring the performance. Then matching the performance against the standards, naturally, that's a important step, perhaps the easy step, because you already have the standards and then you have measured the performance. So you are matching the performance against the standards. And then finally, we have to take the corrective actions. So if there is a positive deviation or there is even no deviation, suppose your performance matches the standards, does that mean we should feel happy that things are as per our expectations? I think even in this, we may have to have a relook at the standards. Suppose all our students score above 75%. Now that means, should we feel only happy about it? I think even in this situation, we have to have a relook at the standards. Is it so that we have set our standards too low and we should revise? Because one of the purpose of evaluation is segregating good performance from not that good performance. And if we are not able to do it, we are doing injustice to students who have put in hard work. That's it. And if there is a negative deviations, then again there is a need to, understand the reasons of deviation. I told you about one of the negative deviation we had in one of our batches, and that was, one of the deviation was that when the sessional test was announced, 25% of the class would take it lightly and would just skip the sessional for one reason or the other. There was no proper reason why they are absenting, and this was a very unusual situation because that has never happened with us earlier. So there was a negative deviation and we have to assess the reason of deviation. Why so many students? I mean, 25% is a large chunk of a class. So why they are absenting? We have to understand the reason. And taking this corrective action is a very important step, and that is why we say that it's an ongoing dynamic process. The moment we have the corrective actions, it means we may have to either go back to the standards or we may have to have a relook at the method of measuring the performance or whatever. I mean, that depends. For example, in that case, when students were absenting from the sessionals, when we truly assessed, If the problem was not in the assessment or when the sessional, we have been doing it for years. The problem was in the admission process, the kind of lot that we got that particular year because of the change system of combining the various sessional tests that are being held for all the master's courses, and through that how the policy of granting admission in the reserved quota was compromised. So we have to assess the reason of deviation. Sometimes when what we look at the problem is only a symptom of the problem, there may be a deeper reason for that deviation, and we have to understand that and bring it to its logical end. And I've already told you this point that controlling is a very, very painful thing for somebody. Nobody likes being controlled. So how do we do it in a subtle manner that we don't breathe on somebody's neck when we are controlling? We are actually concerned with monitoring the performance, and we are not actually breathing down on somebody's neck. Each day if the Vice Chancellor logs in into my class and wants to see whether I am teaching well or not, this would create a very dampening effect on me. I may think of so many things. I may think, okay, maybe somebody has complained about me, or somebody is after me. So we have to come to this point, which I will discuss in the next slide, and that is how do we design the control system? What to control? That's a very crucial question. So what are key performance areas and the strategic control points? I have shared with you this acronym ABC. ABC stands for Always Better Control. I came across this acronym and I liked it because of its crispness. That is why I am using it. So the point is, don't control everything. I have already discussed more controls do not necessarily result in better control. You have to assess what brings results in the organization. And generally, there is an 80-20 rule which applies. 20% of the activities bring 80% of the results. When I was doing my training in Tomco, that was a company called Tata Oil Mills Company Limited in Bombay. Its competitor was Hindustan Levers. The Tomco had a soap called OK, and the competitor soap was Lifebuoy. Lifebuoy continues to be a popular soap even now. You all know it. So I was told that in that organization there were a huge set of products that they were selling as a part of Hindustan Lever's product portfolio. They were into toiletries, they were into dalda and all that. They were making so many things. But the managers were always concerned about the sale of Lifebuoy, how it is faring in the market. Because Lifebuoy was a soap which had a rural presence. And almost 50% of their revenues would come from Lifebuoy. So the manager, the marketing manager knew that if we are able to control the revenues or the sale of Lifebuoy, monitor how it is faring in the market, we will bring significant results to the organization. So what brings major results to the organization? That we have to understand, and that is why this acronym ABC. And I have already shared with you this temptation to focus on what is easy to measure and not that which truly matters. I will discuss you when I take up this example, which I am referring to often on, the example of assessing the performance of a university teacher. But the second question is also what to control afterwards, when and how often to measure. So I told you the two situations. I was being assessed after 3 months. And naturally, you can imagine that's not a good way to measure. And thankfully, the university understood the point, and now the exams are held semester wise. Because of their own ease of convenience, the controller office was holding the exam annually, to the great discomfort of the students. And finally, they conceded the point, and now exams are held semester wise. How often to measure, that also is something which we need to assess. For example, if you are assessing a teacher's performance, should it be on a quarterly basis? Should it be on a semester wise basis? Or should it be on annual basis? Or should it be you promote a person as you appoint a person as lecturer and assess his performance after 10 years when he is eligible for becoming the associate professor? In between, you just leave him like that. So now let us, in order to understand these concepts, let us discuss, because this is something which you are experiencing and you can contribute very significantly because you are part of the system now. How should a university assess its teachers' performance? What are, I have told you about key performance areas and strategy control points. What could be key performance areas for a teacher? What do you think are the key performance areas?
So subject knowledge,
Subject knowledge,
method of teaching,
method of teaching, okay,
interaction with the students,
interaction with the students, okay. What else?
Ways of teaching.
Okay.
So gap in the quality of students before attending the class and after the class, after the
Now,
session actually.
whatever points you are making, and it's a very good point to reflect on, whatever indicators you have discussed up till now are related to just one aspect of his performance, and that is teaching. Is it not so? Is a teacher expected to contribute to teaching only? A university teacher, I'm not talking about a college teacher, I'm talking about a university teacher. A university like AMU. Should he not contribute to research?
Yes, sir. How
Isn't it?
much is he making the students curious?
Again, you are looking at it from the point of view of the students, which is primarily is a teaching process. But the research is something which you do with either your own efforts or with the efforts of a select group of students who are part of your research teams. They may be research scholars working under you for their PhDs, or they may be your research associates whom you have hired as a part of the research grant which you might have got from some funding agency. Isn't it? So now we have assessed two areas of performance: teaching and research. Is a university teacher expected to contribute to something else also apart from teaching and research?
Contribution to society.
Okay, contribution to society is a larger term, very true. And your own academic institution is also a part of that society. Should a teacher contribute to the betterment of the institution of which he is a part?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. You know, ours is primarily a residential university. Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
How do we manage the residential side of the university? And should we not expect teachers to contribute to the residential side?
So teachers act as provost wardens in the
Yes,
hostels.
teachers act as provost, wardens. Teachers act in various administrative capacities in the university. We have member in charges, people who look after the guest house of the university, people who look after the electricity setup, people who look after the generally, for example, teachers who are in the electrical engineering section of our university. They are asked to oversee the functioning of the electricity department of the university. Likewise, people who are part of the civil engineering setup of the university, they are asked to look at the building department and become the MIC of the building department, member in charges. So we have member in charges from amongst the teachers. Now if a teacher says, I don't want to contribute to any of this stuff, I will focus on research and teaching, will the university ever be able to function? In addition to that, there are a lot of things which happen, in our own department. You can appreciate we have so many other things, responsibilities other than our regular teaching and research assignment. For example, we have a teacher who looks after the placement of the students. We have a teacher who looks after the entrepreneurship cell of the university, of the department. We have a teacher who looks after let us say the external interface, holding guest lectures, arranging such kind of lectures, people who want to deliver extramural lectures. So there is इसको हम broad function कहते हैं academic administration, isn't it? So no teacher actually is expected to refuse contribution to these areas. So now you raised the right point, Adnan. It's contribution to society, but contribution to society again has two parts. One is the contribution, the larger corporate contribution, or larger contribution to the corporate life of the university. We call it the corporate life of the university. You have, for example, a professor of botany, and trust me, we have had such committed teachers looking after the land and gardens department during the last 30 years. I have seen the university, how its greenery has grown over the years. They have made wonderful contribution to the greening of the university. And it has become a major point of distinction for our university. Whenever a visitor visits and looks at the gardens that we have been able to maintain, the trees, especially when you visit the university road and you pass across it, the huge tall trees that you have on both the sides, it makes an impact on the visitors. And that has been possible not just through the supervisory team, but because of some person with a vision who understands how greening efforts should be carried out in the university. So a teacher who contributes to such efforts, should this not be a part of his performance assessment? then you are very right that a teacher is expected to contribute to the larger society also. We now call it extension work. So, for example, our department targets financial inclusion as one of our areas of concern in future. There are people who are teaching finance. And you know the contribution that Professor Muhammad Yunus has made in Bangladesh through microfinance system. In fact, he was awarded Nobel Prize for that effort. He ensured that every member of the society who is desirous of an entrepreneurial venture or who is able to upgrade, who is able to use his skill properly and requires some funds for it, he will arrange those funds. And he evolved that system of microcredit, and he wrote a book also on that, The Banker of the Poor. And now Bangladesh, if it fares well, even vis-a-vis India on some parameters, I think if you go back into the roots of it, you will find it was the effort of Professor Muhammad Yunus in Bangladesh. So yes, a teacher has to make a larger contribution to the society also, and we call it extension work. Okay. So we have identified 4 performance areas: teaching, research, academic administration, and finally the extension work which you do with the society. Now, how do we measure it? That's the next question. And again, I shared with you this temptation that all administrators have when they assess the performance of others. They end up focusing on what is easy to measure and not what truly matters. Generally, in the selection committees, there is heavy emphasis on publications. In fact, the basic cutoff point is decided based on that. Whether you have had these publications or not. And as a result, as I said, control is normative, it is value setting. If you design improper controls, it will misdirect the effort. So many of the teachers have become article producing machines. It distorts the value, the norms of teaching. What truly matters, and not just on what is easy to measure. That is one of the toughest challenges of control, isn't it? So let me come to the last part of it, control points. I discussed only a teacher's performance. Likewise, you can have various control points in functional areas, and maybe tomorrow I'll focus specifically on the last part of it, the control points in the finance area, because generally they become very, very indicative of the performance of the organization. Often financial performance is the base of assessment of the performance of the organization, especially if it happens to be a commercial organization. Okay. So tomorrow, if we have time, we will throw some, but I will request you to have a relook at the accounting classes that you have had. Have you discussed ratio in your accounting? Have you discussed ratio analysis in finance? I am expecting a response.
Yes, sir.
So please revisit those ratios. Tomorrow we will discuss how those ratios can be used to assess the performance of an organization. Okay. In addition to some other points like how to measure, when to measure, the frequency of measurement. Okay, so again, let me ask for the volunteers for tomorrow's class.
Sir, Adil Akhtar.
Okay, Adil Akhtar. Tarahum, have you not yet presented your idea? Yeah, your recap?
No, sir.
Okay, so tomorrow Adil Akhtar and Tarahum will present.
Okay.
They will present the recap. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.